Fame promised me a future written in bright lights, but destiny rewrote the script, line by line, with shadows I could never escape. The theater is packed, the lights warm, and the audience rises to its feet as Michael J. Fox takes the stage. He is smiling, still quick with a joke, his voice carrying the same spark that made him a household name. But if you look closely, something else reveals itself. His hand shakes, his steps are careful, measured. It is a reminder that time has rewritten his role, not as a Hollywood star, but as a man fighting a silent, unrelenting battle. For decades, Fox was the symbol of youth, the cool kid from Family Ties, the time-traveling rebel in Back to the Future. His career seemed untouchable, his energy endless. Yet the world now sees a different image, a man who carries courage and fragility in equal measure. At 64, he is no longer just an actor. He has become a living testament to resilience, but also a portrait of loss. Few know how early the shadows began to creep in. At 29, while still at the top of his game, Fox noticed a tremor in his finger. Doctors told him the impossible: Parkinson's disease, a condition with no cure. At first, he kept it hidden, drowning his fear in long nights of drinking, covering his symptoms with humor and charm. But behind closed doors, the mask often slipped. The roles grew harder, the tremors grew stronger. The world, eventually, would have to know. On the outside, he embodied optimism. He spoke of hope, raised over $1 billion for research, and inspired millions living with the same diagnosis. But behind that radiant public face was a man wrestling with the cruelest of ironies, his body failing him just as his career soared. He gave up scripts he once dreamed of performing. He struggled with simple acts most take for granted. And though fans celebrated his bravery, only those closest to him saw the depth of his exhaustion. Fame can magnify triumphs, but it also magnifies pain. Every stumble became a headline. Every absence from the screen stirred whispers. For Fox, the spotlight was no longer protection, it was exposure. And with every appearance, he was reminded not of what he had achieved, but of what he was slowly losing. Still, Michael J. Fox stood tall. He chose to be a beacon, to turn his suffering into purpose. But resilience has its own shadow, a hidden weight that few ever see. Because while the world admired his courage, the man himself was quietly confronting a far darker truth. And that truth would soon change everything we thought we knew about him.
Michael Andrew Fox was born on June 9, 1961, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. His father, William Fox, was a police officer and Canadian Forces sergeant. His mother, Phyllis, worked as a payroll clerk. They were not a wealthy family. Money was often tight, and the Fox household lived on discipline and sacrifice. His father's military career meant the family moved frequently, chasing new postings across Canada, from the prairies to the city of Vancouver. For a young boy, this constant uprooting planted both resilience and restlessness. Michael was small for his age. By the time he entered high school, he stood just over 5 feet tall and weighed less than 100 pounds. The world seemed built for bigger, louder boys. But rather than shrink into the shadows, Michael learned to adapt. He developed quick wit, an instinctive ability to make people laugh, and a surprising fearlessness when it came to performance. In the classroom, he often struggled, but on stage, he came alive. His earliest refuge was art. In middle school, he picked up a guitar and formed a short-lived garage band. Music gave him confidence, but acting gave him direction. Teachers recall how he would throw himself completely into school plays, memorizing lines with laser focus, transforming from the shy, undersized boy into someone far larger than life. Acting was not just a hobby, it became survival, a way to command respect in a world that seemed intent on overlooking him. By the time the family settled in Burnaby, a suburb of Vancouver, Michael knew what he wanted. At 15, he landed his first television role on a Canadian series called Leo and Me, playing a 10-year-old despite being a teenager himself. His small stature became an advantage. Casting directors saw him as versatile, able to play younger roles with convincing charm. This role lit the spark, but it was still just a taste of what he dreamed of, Hollywood. Yet chasing that dream meant sacrifice. His father retired from the military and became a dispatcher to support the family, while Michael began skipping school to audition for commercials and local television spots. His grades plummeted, his teachers warned him he was throwing away his education, but his mother quietly encouraged him. She saw the fire in him, the rare conviction that this was not a phase, it was destiny. At 18, he made a bold decision that would change everything. He left Canada for Los Angeles with only a few $100s and the blessing of his parents. He dropped the Andrew from his name, adopting the middle initial J as a tribute to character actor Michael J. Pollard. It was a practical move, too. There was already a Michael Fox registered in the Screen Actors Guild. Hollywood, however, was merciless. Casting agents told him he was too short, too young-looking, too Canadian. They told him to go home. But rejection only hardened him. To survive, he took odd jobs, lived in near poverty, and scraped by while auditioning relentlessly. At one point, he survived on macaroni and cheese for weeks, rationing every dollar. The dream of fame seemed distant, but he refused to quit. What made him different was not just his persistence, but his ability to turn weaknesses into assets. His boyish look, his small frame, his fast-talking style, traits others dismissed, became his signature. And though the odds seemed stacked against him, Michael J. Fox was about to stumble upon the opportunity that would catapult him from struggling teenager to one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars. But even in this early climb, the first cracks in the foundation were already there, cracks that would one day widen into the tragedy no one saw coming.
Los Angeles in the late 1970s was unforgiving for an unknown Canadian teenager. Casting directors dismissed him as too short or too baby-faced. He was barely scraping by, living in a tiny apartment with little more than second-hand furniture and a mountain of determination. He worked odd jobs, took whatever roles came his way, and survived mostly on stubbornness. Michael often joked later that he was one missed rent check away from going home. But his persistence finally cracked the door open. In 1982, after a string of small television appearances, Michael landed the role that would change his life, Alex P. Keaton on the NBC sitcom Family Ties. At first, producers weren't convinced. Network executives thought his youthful look would make audiences struggle to take him seriously. But once he stepped on set, his timing, charm, and razor-sharp wit proved irresistible. Alex Keaton, the conservative, suit-wearing son in a liberal household, became a phenomenon. The show was an instant hit, and Michael stole the spotlight. Viewers adored him. He won 3 consecutive Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe, turning the once uncertain Canadian into one of America's most beloved TV stars. His comic genius made audiences laugh, but behind the laughs was relentless work. He studied scripts late into the night, refining every beat, every glance, every pause. Michael wasn't just lucky, he was obsessive in his craft. Still, television was only the beginning. In 1984, fate delivered the role of a lifetime. Eric Stoltz had been cast as Marty McFly in Back to the Future, but after several weeks of filming, director Robert Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg felt something wasn't right. The part demanded energy, speed, a spark that could make time travel believable.
they turned to Michael J. Fox. There was one problem. Family Ties producers didn't want to lose their star. So Michael made a choice that would define his resilience. He did both. He filmed Family Ties during the day, then rushed to the Back to the Future set at night, sometimes working until 2 or 3 a.m. before returning to the sitcom by morning. For months, he lived in a blur of exhaustion, fueled only by adrenaline and ambition. The gamble paid off. When Back to the Future premiered in 1985, it became a cultural earthquake. Marty McFly, with his skateboard, denim jacket, and teenage swagger, became the face of a generation. The film grossed over $380 million worldwide and cemented Michael J. Fox as a Hollywood superstar. He had gone from struggling Canadian hopeful to one of the most bankable young actors in the world almost overnight. But success carried invisible costs. Michael, barely in his mid-20s, suddenly found himself working non-stop, churning out sequels, films, and television appearances. He starred in Teen Wolf, The Secret of My Success, and Bright Lights Big City. The world saw endless energy, a man who seemed incapable of slowing down. Yet, in private, exhaustion was gnawing at him. He often ran on only a few hours of sleep, sometimes numbing himself with alcohol to quiet the pressure. There were whispers, too, that he was pushing himself too hard, that the image of the eternally youthful star was unsustainable. He once admitted that in those years he lived in constant fear that it could all disappear as quickly as it had arrived. This fear drove him, but it also planted the seeds of a darker future. Michael J. Fox had reached the turning point every actor dreams of: fame, money, power, and influence. But hidden beneath the red carpets and the laughter was a reality few understood. Because the very qualities that lifted him to stardom, the energy, the restlessness, the refusal to stop, were the same cracks that one day would split his world wide open.
By the late 1980s, Michael J. Fox had ascended into a rarefied space. He was no longer just a rising star. He was the very definition of Hollywood success. At only 26 years old, he was headlining box office hits, winning awards, and filling magazine covers around the world. Fans adored him as the boyish charmer who never seemed to age, while studio executives hailed him as a golden ticket. The Back to the Future trilogy had already cemented his place in cinematic history. With each film, Marty McFly became more than just a character. He became a cultural icon. Kids imitated his skateboard stunts, parents appreciated his quick wit, and the DeLorean became a time machine of collective imagination. But Fox was no one-hit wonder. He proved his versatility by switching seamlessly from comedy to drama, from sitcoms to silver screen roles that demanded more emotional weight. In 1989, Back to the Future Part 2 broke records, and Fox's star power only intensified. He was offered scripts constantly, romantic leads, action roles, prestige dramas. He had his pick, and for a while, it seemed like there was no ceiling. He balanced blockbuster films with projects that mattered to him personally, like Casualties of War, where he played a soldier confronting the horrors of Vietnam. It was a serious role, demanding vulnerability, and Fox delivered, earning critical acclaim for shedding his comedic persona to reveal unexpected depth. Behind the scenes, his life seemed equally charmed. In 1988, he married actress Tracy Poland, his former Family Ties co-star. Unlike many Hollywood relationships, theirs was built on a rare foundation of loyalty and trust. The couple quickly became known as one of Hollywood's most grounded marriages. They welcomed their first child, son Sam, in 1989, followed by twin daughters in 1995. To the outside world, Fox seemed to have it all: a thriving career, a beautiful family, and the adoration of millions. Yet even in this golden period, subtle cracks appeared. Fox himself admitted he lived at a relentless pace, rarely pausing to reflect. Fame had given him everything, but it also demanded everything in return. Endless publicity tours, constant scripts, late-night shoots. His life blurred into a cycle of work and appearances. Colleagues noticed how often he pushed himself beyond reason, showing up exhausted, yet still able to charm cameras with effortless energy. There were other quieter struggles too. Fox worried about being typecast as the eternal boyish lead, fearing that Hollywood would one day move on to fresher faces. He tried diversifying his roles, but the public still clung to his image as Marty McFly, the teenager frozen in time. It was both a blessing and a curse. He would forever be remembered as the man who made time travel real, but it also meant escaping that image would be nearly impossible. By the early 1990s, his box office power began to waver slightly, though he remained a bankable star. He shifted toward projects that allowed more balance, including the ABC sitcom Spin City, which debuted in 1996. As Deputy Mayor Mike Flaherty, Fox reinvented himself for television once again. The show was a hit, earning him another wave of critical praise and awards, including 3 Golden Globes. It proved that even after a decade of superstardom, Michael J. Fox could adapt and thrive. But while audiences saw a man at the top of his game, Michael was quietly living a double life. For years, he had kept a devastating secret: his Parkinson's diagnosis, given in 1991 when he was only 29. The tremors were getting harder to hide. The scripts he chose were increasingly shaped by what his body could still manage, and though the world saw a star at his peak, Michael knew that a darker chapter was about to begin.
For much of the 1990s, Michael J. Fox maintained the illusion that nothing was wrong. On camera, he was the same quick-witted, fast-moving star audiences adored. But behind closed doors, the mask was slipping. The diagnosis of Parkinson's disease he had received in 1991 remained a tightly guarded secret. At first, he tried to outrun it. He buried himself in work, taking on more projects, more roles, as if sheer momentum could silence the tremors. But the body does not negotiate. The shaking in his hand grew worse, sometimes forcing him to hold props in specific ways to keep it hidden. Directors angled cameras to avoid lingering too long on his left side. By the mid-1990s, alcohol had become a crutch. Fox himself later admitted that he drank heavily during those years, numbing both the physical discomfort and the gnawing fear of what was coming. In his memoir Lucky Man, he described waking up with hangovers that felt darker than the night before, realizing that no amount of alcohol could erase the truth of his illness. The double life took its toll. On Spin City, which launched in 1996, his brilliance as Deputy Mayor Mike Flaherty won him awards and critical acclaim, but even castmates noticed the strain. He often clutched props to steady his hands, and between takes, he fought to control the tremors that were worsening each year. In 1998, unable to hide it any longer, he went public with his diagnosis. The announcement shocked the world. Headlines blared across newspapers: Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's. The revelation shifted his image overnight. He was no longer just a star. He was now a symbol of courage in the face of disease. But that spotlight was complicated. While fans and colleagues rallied to his side, the cruel reality was that his acting opportunities began to shrink. Studios, wary of his condition, hesitated to ensure productions. Leading roles were suddenly rare, and the career that had once seemed limitless now felt finite. The press painted him as heroic, but few reported the darker truth, that Fox was terrified of losing the very identity he had built his life around. Acting wasn't just his career, it was his language, his purpose. Losing it felt like losing himself. "I felt like a dead man walking," he confessed years later, reflecting on the early days of his diagnosis. In 2000, he made the heartbreaking decision to leave Spin City. At just 39 years old, he was stepping back from the profession he loved most. His final season earned him an Emmy, But behind the applause was grief, his and his fans. Critics praised his courage, but the man himself was quietly mourning the loss of control over his own destiny. Yet out of this downfall emerged a new chapter. Fox poured his energy into advocacy, founding the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, which would go on to raise over $1 billion for scientific breakthroughs. He transformed his personal tragedy into a mission far greater than his career. But that too came with its weight. Being the face of a disease meant his private struggles were constantly public. Every slip, every stumble became symbolic. He carried not just his own burden, but the expectations of millions who looked to him for hope. His colleagues admired his resilience. Christopher Lloyd, his longtime Back to the Future co-star, once said that Michael had a kind of optimism that lifts everyone around him, even when he's at his lowest. But optimism does not erase pain. And behind the foundation events, the smiling interviews, the public appearances, Michael J. Fox was fighting battles far darker than the cameras ever revealed. Because the world saw bravery, what they didn't see was the cost. The nights of despair, the fading roles, and the slow erosion of a man who had once seemed invincible.
By the early 2000s, Michael J. Fox was no longer the Hollywood leading man he had once been. Parkinson's had become visible, undeniable. The tremors that began in his 20s now shaped every public appearance. Yet, in the eyes of millions, he remained a symbol of resilience. To many, his life was a testament to courage. But beneath the applause lay a harsher truth. Every year stole more of the man he once was. In interviews, Fox admitted that the disease stripped away more than movement. It tested his patience, his confidence, his very sense of identity. The hardest part isn't the tremors, he once said. It's the loss of freedom. The simple things. Writing your name, holding a glass of water, tying your shoes. Those are the things you miss. The physical toll was only part of the tragedy. Parkinson's is progressive, relentless. By the 2010s, Fox was undergoing multiple surgeries to treat complications. In 2018, he revealed he had a dangerous spinal tumor removed, a surgery that left him learning to walk again. Soon after, he suffered a serious fall in his kitchen, shattering his arm. The man once defined by quick reflexes and youthful agility now faced the humiliation of being betrayed by his own body at every turn. He spoke honestly about depression. In his memoir, No Time Like the Future, 2020, he revealed that for the first time, optimism abandoned him. After his fall, he sat in a wheelchair, arm in a cast, wondering if he had finally reached the point of no return. "That was my darkest moment," he admitted. "I just didn't see how I could recover." For a man who had built his public persona on hope, the confession was devastating. But perhaps the cruelest irony of Michael J. Fox's tragedy is time itself. He had built a career playing characters who bent time, who outran the clock, who rewrote destiny. In reality, time was his greatest enemy. Each year tightened its grip, robbing him of roles, of independence, of the everyday rhythms that defined his life. The eternal teenager on screen was now a man aging faster than he should, his body decades older than his spirit. There were smaller heartbreaks too, moments the public rarely saw. Friends recalled how he could no longer play guitar the way he once did, the tremors stealing the music from his fingers. His handwriting shrank into illegible scrawls. Even his trademark quick wit, though sharp as ever, was slowed by the physical effort of speech. Every joy carried its shadow. Still, the world kept watching, applauding his bravery, his advocacy, his ability to smile through pain. Yet the truth is that Michael J. Fox's story is not just about heroism. It is about fragility. about the cruel intersection of fame and illness. Because while audiences cheered for his courage, they rarely saw the nights when exhaustion broke him, when the disease reduced him to tears, when he wondered how long he could keep going. The climax of his life story is not a single moment, but a gradual erosion. Not one downfall, but 1,000 small defeats. The man who once raced across movie screens, guitar blazing in Back to the Future, now moved carefully, deliberately, every step a battle. And still he stood. For Michael J. Fox, tragedy was never a dramatic collapse. It was the slow, merciless passage of time. And that, perhaps, is the darkest truth of all.
When people speak of Michael J. Fox today, they do not speak only of Back to the Future or Family Ties. They speak of endurance, of hope in the face of something unrelenting. His greatest role was not Marty McFly, but Michael J. Fox himself, the man who turned personal suffering into a mission for millions. Since its founding in 2000, the Michael J. Fox Foundation has become the world's leading nonprofit funder of Parkinson's research. It has raised over $1.75 billion, fueling clinical trials and breakthroughs that may one day change the course of the disease. Scientists and patients alike credit Fox not only with financial support, but with giving Parkinson's a human face, making it impossible for the world to ignore. Colleagues describe him as disarmingly kind. Tracy Pollan, his wife of more than 3 decades, has said that his humor never left him, even in the darkest moments. Christopher Lloyd has called him a brother in spirit, someone whose resilience inspired everyone on set and off. Even those who met him briefly remember his generosity, signing autographs with shaky hands, taking time for fans long after his body begged for rest. But Fox's legacy is not just institutional or public. It is personal. His children grew up watching their father's courage, learning that strength is not measured by what you can conquer, but by how you continue when you cannot. His story has become a mirror for countless families living with chronic illness, proof that dignity can survive decline, and meaning can survive loss. Reflecting on his life, Fox once said, "With gratitude, optimism is sustainable." That sentence encapsulates his philosophy. Gratitude for the time he had, gratitude for the people who stood beside him, gratitude even for the challenges that stripped him of comfort but revealed his true self. His optimism was not naive. It was defiant. It was a choice to live fully, even when fate tried to reduce him to a diagnosis. And so, Michael J. Fox's story comes full circle. The boy from Canada who once dreamed of stardom became a man who found something far greater. His fame did not protect him. His talent could not save him, and time refused to bend to his will. Yet in losing control of his body, he gained something indestructible: legacy. He will always be remembered as the young man who lit up the screen, but also as the elder statesman of resilience. His tragedy is undeniable, but so is the lesson he leaves behind, that life is not measured in the years you stay unbroken, but in the courage you show when you finally are. And in that sense, Michael J. Fox, even in fragility, remains timeless.
Michael J. Fox's story forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. What does fame really give us? Hollywood built him into an icon, but it could not shield him from the slow cruelty of time or disease. The media turned his struggle into headlines, yet the truth is quieter, more human. A man simply trying to hold on to dignity as the world watched. His tragedy is not isolated. It reflects the fragility of an industry that celebrates youth while ignoring vulnerability. But in the end, Fox rewrote the script. He showed that meaning can be carved from pain, and that legacy is not built in the spotlight, it is built in how you endure the darkness.